devotion without attachment is by far superior. Text 8. Niyatam kuru karma tvam karma jayo hyarmanaha sharira yatra pichate na prasidye akarmanaha. Translation: perform your prescribed duty, for action is better than inaction. A man cannot even maintain his physical body without work. Text 9. Yagnartha karma no nyatra loko yam karma bandhana tad artam karma konteya mukta sangha samachara. Translation: work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work binds one to this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain unattached and free from bondage. Text 10. Sahayagna prajastrisva purovacha prajapati anena prasavishyadvam eshavo srista kamaduk. Translation: in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yajna, sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you all desirable things." Text 11. Devan bhavyayatane te deva bhavayantuha Parasparam bhavayanta shreya param avapchata. Translation: the demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you. Thus, nourishing one another, there will reign general prosperity for all. Text 12. Ishtan bhogan hivo deva dasyante yajna bhavitaha Terdatan apradayabhyo yo bhunkte stena eva saha. Translation: in charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, sacrifice, supply all necessities to man. But he who enjoys these gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Text 13. Yagna shishtashina santo muchyante sarvakil bishai bunjate te tvagam papa ye pachant yatma karanat. Translation: the devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Text 14. Anan bhavanti bhutani parjanya anasambhava yagna bhavati parjanyo yagna karma samudbhava. Translation: all living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rain. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. Text 15. Karma brahmodbhavam vidhi brahmakshara samudbhavam tasmat sarva gatam brahma nityam yagne pratishtitam. Translation: regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. Text 16. Evam pravartitam chakram nanuvartayatitahaya aghayur indriyaramo mogham partha sajivati. Translation: my dear Arjuna, a man who does not follow this prescribed Vedic system of sacrifice certainly leads a life of sin, for a person delighting only in the senses lives in vain. Text 17, final text. Yastvatma ritireva atma triptascha manavaha atmanyeva cha santushtas tasya karyam navidyate. Translation. One who is, however, taking pleasure in the self, who is illumined in the self, who rejoices in and is satisfied with the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. Now I'll go back and read a purport. Translations and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Jai Srila Prabhupada. I'm going to go back to 9, text 9, translation. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work binds one to this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain unattached and free from bondage. Purport. Since one has to work even for the simple maintenance of the body, the prescribed duties for a particular social position and quality are so made that the purpose can be fulfilled. Yajna means Lord Vishnu, or sacrificial performances. All sacrificial performances also are meant for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. The Vedas enjoin Yajno vai Vishnu. In other words, the same purpose is served whether one performs prescribed yajnas or directly serves Lord Vishnu. Krishna consciousness is therefore performance of yajna as it is prescribed in this verse. The Varnashram institution also aims at this for satisfying Lord Vishnu. Varnashram charavata purushena para puman Vishnur arajyate, Vishnu Purana 388. Therefore, one has to work for the satisfaction of Vishnu. Any other work done in this material world will be a cause of bondage, for both good and evil work have their reactions, and any reaction binds the performer. Therefore, one has to work in Krishna consciousness to satisfy Krishna or Vishnu, and while performing such activities, one is in a liberated stage. This is the great art of doing work, and in the beginning, this process requires very expert guidance. One should therefore act very diligently under the expert guidance of a devotee of Lord Krishna or under the direct instruction of Lord Krishna himself, under whom Arjuna had the opportunity to work. Nothing should be performed for sense gratification, but everything should be done for the satisfaction of Krishna. This practice will not only save one from the reaction of work, but will also gradually elevate one to transcendental loving service of the Lord, which alone can raise one to the kingdom of God. So it will gradually elevate one to the transcendental loving service of the Lord, which alone can raise one to the kingdom of God. So it's a gradual process. It's a stair step. It's a steps of bhakti, the ladder, the yoga ladder, as they call it sometimes, as we call it. And a lot of great mantras do start with Om. They start with Om, and that's giving it up to Lord Vishnu. That's invoking Lord Vishnu's name. Om is representative of Lord Krishna, Lord Vishnu's name. And so there's 33 core demigods, so many, and excuse me. But they all start with Om, and they all bow to Lord Krishna. All the demigods bow to Lord Krishna as supreme. And so going straight to the source, we don't have to necessarily spend a lot of time worshiping demigods. You can go straight to the source, and demigods will be pleased then too. The devas and the devatas, as they're called. A word like Prajapati, the maintainer of all living entities. And got Nishkama. A pure devotee can be called Nishkama. No desires for their personal interests at all. And I would like to read a quick quote from one of Srila Prabhupada's books here. This is Renunciation Through Wisdom 1.9. The actual yogis are the karma yogis, the jnana yogis, the ashtanga yogis, and the bhakti yogis. Factually, they are the same, although named differently. The yogic process is like a ladder one ascends gradually toward the final goal of the absolute truth. Nishkama karma, or renunciation of the fruits of one's labor, is the first step on this ladder. When knowledge and austerity are added to it, it becomes jnana yoga, the second step in this ladder. And when meditation on the Supreme is added to jnana yoga, the third step is reached, namely ashtanga yoga. Finally, when loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord is practiced along with ashtanga yoga, it is transformed into bhakti yoga. This entire successive process is yoga. And so we want to water the root of the tree. We don't want to water the branches and the leaves. It's kind of funny. One of the first times I came here, I had been in the backyard and I had actually kind of been watering the leaves and the upper branches of this tree in my backyard, and where I used to live. And that same day, Maharaj Dhanavir Goswami, mentioned this verse, and so it became very powerful of this concept of you water the root of the tree. You don't water the leaves and things like that. You go straight to the source. And in Krishna consciousness, we find so many things like that where you will read something and then later that day in class, you will hear something similar. And there's just so many connections that are being made. It's so nice. And why Bhagavad Gita? Well, there's a verse, Bhagavad Gita 9:2. Raja Vijay Rajaguyam Pavitram. Raja Vijay Rajaguyam Pavitram. Can't get it. This knowledge is the king of knowledge, the most secret of secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self through realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. So, do you put the food in your hands, or do you give it to the mouth, which gives it to the stomach, right? So, you give the food to the stomach, and then the whole body is very happy. Also, there's the analogy of milk and yogurt. You can make yogurt from milk, but not the other way around. Milk is the pure substance. Sometimes Lord Vishnu is called Yagnapati, the Lord of all sacrifices. And so also in this chapter, Krishna is speaking so much of lust and how dangerous lust is and how it's the all-devouring enemy of mankind. And, there's things that start like nectar, but they end in poison. And there's things that start a little bitter, but then in the end, they taste so sweet and ambrosial. I wrote just a quick poem regarding lust. It's called Disgusting Lust. At the beginning, you look like honey. Pretty soon, something seems a little funny. For the price of lust, there is a cost. We don't want our spiritual lives to become lost. This is a rare opportunity, a special chance to associate, study, sing, and dance. Lord Sri Krishna makes it very clear, this all-devouring enemy bring never near. A new way of looking at life we must. Never embrace this disgusting lust. And in the material world, people don't really, they don't really want, they're not really after a long-term loving reciprocal. I mean, deep down they are, but they think they want the short-term, the piece of candy and not the fruit. They aren't going after long-term loving relationships that involve compromise, things like that. So many intricacies that a long-term relationship has. They want the free, cheap thrills, basically a free amusement park. And they will get the results. They will get, the karmic results, So when people eat food that has not been offered properly, then they're getting those results. The food they eat is only sin. And so how many people out there, just in Kansas City, are taking on more sin just because of lack of knowledge and things like this, and they're eating sin and they're taking part in sinful activities. So we're here to help them realize the truth and the supreme truth. And sense gratification for the materialist eventually almost becomes like a job. They eventually lose the taste and thrill, and yet they continue out of stubbornness and or habit, fantasy. There becomes very little pleasure, but yet they continue, like the camel enjoying the eating of the thorns despite the bleeding. So there's camel that will eat these certain kinds of thorns, and it's tasty to them, but it causes the bleeding in the mouth, and then they continue. There's a funny story about sugarcane. One person had never had sugarcane, and so he asked this other person, he said, so what is it like? What is a sugarcane like? And he said, well, it's like a bamboo log, you just kind of, it's like so many bamboo logs. And so this person is going around chewing on so many bamboo logs, not getting the real taste, trying to find the sweetness. And that's what the material life is like, trying to find sweetness in a bamboo log. There's also a story of, I'll skip that one. Sri Yamunacharya, great Gaudiya Vaishnava devotee, he said this desire for sex is so strong. He says, since he has been serving, he has no desire for sex life, and even if he remembers it, he turns his head and he wants to spit on it. So we kind of have to have that attitude of something that we know isn't good for us. We kind of have to make it, we just have to absolutely not tolerate it. So what do we tolerate? What are we willing to tolerate and what do we not? Vaishnava is very tolerant, but not of negative things. Not of going against the 4 regular principles, not against chanting 16 rounds a day. And Krishna is Madana Mohan, Cupid himself, who is kind of agitating everyone. But if we actually get attached to seeing the beauty of Krishna, Cupid's arrows have no power over us. And Krishna doesn't give us challenges that he doesn't think we can overcome. So if it's a challenge in front of us, we know that Krishna is saying, you can overcome this challenge with my help and a little bit of time and patience and knowledge. So overcoming lust is very hard, but not impossible. And think for a second about what one gains if one is no longer controlled and imprisoned by lust. Actually, there's freedom. This is actually freedom. Getting away from lust is actually freedom from the shackles. The ability to be truly happy opens up to us all of a sudden. No lust. So many things stem from lust. Greed, anger, enmity. And I'd like to go on to another purport here. Verse number 10. Translation. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth the generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you all desirable things. Purport. The material creation by the Lord of creatures, Vishnu, is a chance offered to the conditioned souls to come back home, back to Godhead. All living entities within the material creation are conditioned by material nature because of their forgetfulness of their relationship to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic principles are to help us understand this eternal relation as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Vidaischa sarver aham eva vedya. The Lord says that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand him. So the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Lord Krishna, God himself. In the Vedic hymns, it is said, Patim Vishvashyatameshvaram. Therefore, the Lord of the living entities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, also, Srila Shukdev Goswami describes the Lord as Pati in so many ways. Shriya Patir Yagna Pati Praja Patir Diyam Patir Loka Patir Dara Pati Patir Gatish Chandaka Vrishni Satvatam Prasidatam Me Bhagavan Satam Pati. Srimad Bhagavatam 2:4-20. The Prajapati is Lord Vishnu, and he is the Lord of all living creatures, all worlds and all beauties, and the protector of everyone. The Lord created this material world for the conditioned souls to learn how to perform yajnas, sacrifice, for the satisfaction of Vishnu, so that while in the material world, they can live very comfortably without anxiety. Then, after finishing the present material body, they can enter into the kingdom of God. That is the whole program for the conditioned soul. By performance of yajna, the conditioned souls gradually become Krishna conscious and become godly in all respects. In this age of Kali, the Sankirtan Yajna, the chanting of the names of God, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this transcendental system was introduced by Lord Chaitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtan Yajna and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna, in his devotional form as Lord Chaitanya, is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam as follows, with special reference to the Sankirtan Yajna. Krishna Varnam Tvisharshanam Sangopangashtra Parshadam Yagnai Sankirtan Prayer Yajanti Hisu Medhasaha Shishi Gornatai Kichai. In this age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates by performance of Sankirtan Yajna. Bhagavatam 11:5-29. Other yajnas prescribed in the Vedic literatures are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but the Sankirtan Yajna is easy and sublime for all purposes. So Sankirtan, together the congregational chanting of the Lord's names through the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is the recommended way in this age. It's simple, yet powerful, yet supremely powerful. So sacrifice. So one of the reasons we're here is to learn about sacrifice and learn how to perform sacrifice. And a sacrifice is kind of like a gift, a sacrifice. If I sweep the floor or do some cleaning in the temple, it's a small sacrifice. It's a small gift. That's devotional service. And in Dhanavir Goswami Maharaj's book, Bright Side, he highlights Srila Rupa Goswami's 6 steps to establish and maintain loving relationships. And the first step is offering gifts to others, dadati. And this, quote, this invokes friendship. A gift makes you care, a selfless gift. God gives us so many gifts. God is giving us everything. Everything you see here is God's property, and everything is a gift from God. So he's given us so many gifts. And he is the great gift giver. And when you give a gift, you are giving some of yourself. It's, quote, a vehicle of connection. And a baby can't really share or think about the welfare of others, but as it gets older, it can start to become a little bit selfless and start to think about the welfare of others. Giving a gift is a function of love. And when saints, historically in India and things like that, saints will go door to door and beg alms, and they'll put their cloth out. And it's their association that they are giving, which is so valuable. So the association of a great person is a very valuable gift. Let me see here a second. I'd like to highlight a couple of the, one second here. Okay. In the plates, I was going to look at plates 12, 13, and 14 towards the front of your book here. So plate 12, there's Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasa. Be thou happy by this sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you all desirable things. So there he is with so many of the townspeople blissfully chanting Sankirtan. And then plate 13. The demigods, being satisfied by the performance of sacrifice, supply all needs to man. So on the left there, you see Chandra, the moon god. Next to him is Indra, rain god. Next to him, to the right, in the middle, below Krishna, Vishwan, sun god. And then we have Vayu, god of air. And then Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. So the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of sacrifice, supply all needs to man. So it's a wonderful relationship, a give and take relationship. And these demigods are actually very powerful, much more powerful than a normal person, than us. And so these demigods are very powerful, but they all work under the direction of Lord Sri Krishna. And then plate 14, the living entity is covered by different degrees of lust. So here, the living entity in the center is being enveloped in lust. There's up the top, we see fire covered by smoke. And then we see a mirror covered by dust. And then we see an embryo being covered by the womb. What is moral? If we have to ask ourselves, what is moral? If Lord Sri Krishna is satisfied, it is moral and perfect. There's a quote from the Ishopanishad. Ishivashyam idam sarvam. Everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this material world, we speak of morals, and one time there were some thieves dividing up some of their stolen merchandise together, and one of them said, "Please divide it up morally. Let's be fair about this." So it's kind of interesting. What's the word? Kind of counterintuitive. What about renunciation? Arjuna is asking, renunciation or work? Do I give up everything and just meditate, or do I work? Nishkarma karma yoga. And it's do our duty without attachment. And like it was said, one cannot remain not working. It's not possible, and it's unnatural. The three modes of nature actually force you into working. So I do think we have to help people, we have to help show people how to offer food to Lord Sri Krishna, because we want Kansas City, we want so many people in Kansas City to not just be eating sin. So if we can help show them the process, I think that's one of the best things we can do, is to help people with their food, if they can offer that. It'd be such a great step. So in 14 through 16, he's describing the cycle of sacrifice in order. Number 1, we have our prescribed duties. Number 2, yajna, sacrifice. 3, rain, what comes from rain, grains. Number 5, the living entities are nourished. Nishkama Karma Yoga, to set an example. A self-realized soul need not work, but still he works to set an example. Even Lord Sri Krishna says, if I didn't set an example, everything would degrade. So here you can see that Krishna is very concerned with setting a good example, and he's very concerned with how we are affected. He's always thinking about us and our well-being. We should try to return this favor. And I just feel like, I've been to, I've got to visit, a few temples now, about 7 to 8 ISKCON temples. And I just have to say that maybe I'm a little biased, but the prasadam here at Rupanuga Vedic College is so nice. It has to be my favorite, so I just have to mention that. And there's one other purport I wanted to read. 14, chapter 3, text 14 here. Translation: all living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rain. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. Purport: Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana, a great commentator on the Bhagavad Gita, writes as follows: Ye indriyanga ayavashtitam yagna sarvesh varam vishnum abhyacharya teshicham ashnanti tena tadena yantram sampadyanti te santa sarvesh varsya bhakta sarva kilvishar anandi kala vidrider atmanubhava pratibandhaker nikhile pepar vimuchante. The Supreme Lord, who is known as the Yajna Purusha, or the personal beneficiary of all sacrifices, is the master of all demigods, who serve him as the different limbs of the body serve the whole. Demigods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, etc. are appointed officers who manage material affairs, and the Vedas direct sacrifices to satisfy these demigods so that they may be pleased to supply air, light, and water sufficiently to produce food grains. When Lord Krishna is worshipped, the demigods, who are different limbs of the Lord, are also automatically worshipped. Therefore, there is no separate need to worship the demigods. For this reason, the devotees of the Lord who are in Krishna consciousness offer food to Krishna and then eat, a process which nourishes the body spiritually. By such action, not only are past sinful reactions in the body vanquished, but the body becomes immunized to all contamination of material nature. When there is an epidemic disease, an antiseptic vaccine protects a person from the attack of such an epidemic. Similarly, food offered to Lord Vishnu and then taken by us makes us sufficiently resistant to material affection, and one who is accustomed to this practice is called a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness who eats only food offered to Krishna can counteract all reactions of past material infections, which are impediments to the progress of self-realization. On the other hand, one who does not do so continues to increase the volume of sinful action, and this prepares the next body to resemble hogs and dogs, to suffer the resultant reactions of all sins. The material world is full of contaminations, and one who is immunized by accepting prasadam of the Lord, food offered to Vishnu, is saved from the attack, whereas one who does not do so becomes subjected to contamination. Food grains or vegetables are factually eatables. The human being eats different kinds of food grains, vegetables, fruits, etc., and the animals eat the refuse of the food grains and vegetables, grass, plants, etc. Human beings who are accustomed to eating meat and flesh must also depend on the production of vegetation in order to eat the animals. Therefore, ultimately, we have to depend on the production of the field and not on the production of big factories. The field production is due to sufficient rain from the sky, and such rains are controlled by demigods like Indra, sun, moon, etc., and they are all servants of the Lord. The Lord can be satisfied by sacrifices. Therefore, one who cannot perform them will find himself in scarcity. That is the law of nature. Yajna, specifically the Sankirtan Yajna prescribed for this age, must therefore be performed to save us at least from scarcity of food supply. So he says, on the other hand, one who does not do so continues to increase the volume of sinful action, and this prepares the next body to resemble hogs and dogs, to suffer the resultant reactions of all sins. So our consciousness and our actions are helping prepare what happens when we leave this body. Everything is not over after we leave this body. This body is just a vehicle. And so the state of consciousness, especially at the moment of death, is very important. So we're trying to prepare ourselves to remember Krishna at all times, and especially at the moment of death, which could happen at any time. It could happen 40 years from now, or who knows, tomorrow. We don't know. So that's why we have to try to always keep Lord Shri Krishna on our mind and try to keep serving him on our mind at all times. And it's actually very nice. It's actually a very nice way of life and philosophy. Just And then those who are eating meat are also just eating vegetables in a different form. It starts with the sun and rain, and then the fruit and the vegetables are closest to that sun, and then animals, eat the grass and the grains and things. And so why not go closer to the source? Why not eat the beautiful vegetables and fruits that Lord Sri Krishna says, you can offer me these. I will accept these. This animal flesh I do not accept. So we want to eat what Krishna eats. And we want to associate with him as much as we can. So that's it. And is there any, yes, Magadhari Prabhu?
So many of the purports we read, they mentioned that for this age, yagya means sankirtan yagya. So I'm just wondering how we can understand that we are in this age of Kali.
There's 4 really big ages, hundreds of thousands of years apiece. And when Lord Sri Krishna left 5,000 years ago, that's when the age of Kali actually started, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam and the great scriptures. And it's the 4th age before a big devastation and before a reset, before the ages start over again. So we're about 5,000 years into this 432,000 year cycle of Kali. And it's a very degraded age, and it's different ages were more pious or things might have been easier in certain ways, but things are now easier since Lord Chaitanya came 500 years ago. Things are much easier. Now that we have the Maha Mantras, he's given us the secret Maha Mantra and says, just chant this. So simplified, as you see the great acharyas in the line of disciplic succession, and they have simplified for us, for our benefit. And the age of Kali. So. Hare Krishna, Bhakti Jio Prabhu.
So we were talking about yagya a little bit earlier, and in the purport it was saying that if you can't perform, one who doesn't perform yagya, I can't remember exactly what Prabhupada said, but he said they're unfortunate in some way. But I was just wondering, because some people, especially in this day and age, like the prescribed yagya is Sankirtan, so hearing and chanting of the holy names. But like, my question is, like, what happens if someone can't physically perform the yagya, but they still follow the regulative principles? Do they still suffer, or is it like, or do they benefit from that? That's it.
Yeah, I think sacrifice can be, even no matter where someone is in their current position. They can be confined to a hospital bed, but if they can train their mind to sacrifice, to chant, they might not even be able to speak the Lord's name verbally, but if they can speak it in their mind, and they're still acting and they're still thinking, if they're acting and thinking, then they can sacrifice and they can give a gift to God. Krishna says, one who gives me a leaf, a water, fruit, these I will accept. And so just an offering that's designed to where you don't have to be a rich person to give an offering to Krishna. You don't have to give $100,000. You can give a simple leaf if it comes from the heart. And so it can be mental sacrifice, it can be from your intelligence. And it's a way of living. Bhakti yoga is really a way of living. It's a whole paradigm shift, where instead of ourselves in the center, God is in the center. And we get to associate with so many like-minded individuals. And so it's really nice, actually. Hare Krishna. Krishna Bhagavan, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. The 4 regulated principles are not necessarily transcendental principles. They're more or less material on the material platform. So if one just follows, or if one just abstains from those activities, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're transcending or performing sacrifice to Krishna, but it's pious, it's mode of goodness. And ultimately, it will help the person come to God consciousness, but it won't, without doing it for a service to Krishna, it's not actually, you're not making spiritual benefit. But I wanted to make another point about lust, because lust is not just desire for or wanting to enjoy sexual satisfaction, which is the highest pleasure in the material world, but one can have lust for any sense object. The verse that we went over earlier in the second chapter, Dhyayato Vishyam Pumsas Sangasteshu Pajayate, that this Dhyayato Vishyan Pumsa, this contemplation, attachment arises. And from this attachment, then lust develops. And then we know that lust leads to anger, etc. And then ultimately one falls down to the material pole, or they engage in material sense gratification. So this lust can be over anything. It can be over a piece of cake, or another person's body, or having money, and having prestige, having some sort of honor, adoration, etc., etc. So we have to be careful about what we contemplate and how we are utilizing this mental energy, because it is going to be cultivating or developing these stages if we're doing it materially. Like if we're trying to enjoy something materially, some sort of sense object. But if we think about Krishna, then we develop attachment for Krishna. And that is wanted. And then we develop great desire to serve Krishna. And the more you serve Krishna, the more enthusiastic you get to serve Krishna more and more and more. So that is the amazing thing about spiritual life. And there was some other point I wanted to share too. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this point about how do we know that it's Kali Yuga, because some people say, some other traditions, they may, even in the Vedic sphere, or so-called Vedic sphere, they may say, this is not Kali Yuga, this is some other Yuga. But they would have to discredit historical facts of Lord Chaitanya's appearance, the literatures of the Goswamis, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, etc. They would have to convince, or they would have to prove that these people were actually sharing the truth, you know. And that's a big weight, because these are great learned scholars, and even in the material sphere. And then how do you explain Lord Chaitanya himself, who came and spoke about how this is the process for this age, and came and was predicted to come in the age of Kali from the Vedas. So these people, they may accept the Vedas, but because they're not coming in the disciplic succession, then they don't have the real understanding of the Vedas. So then they may have these different interpretations, like this is not Kali Yuga, it's actually Dwapara Yuga. Well, if it's Dwapara Yuga, the process isn't Sankirtan Yoga, the process is deity worship. So, or if they say it's Treta Yuga, fire sacrifice, you know. We can't perform these things actually in this age. It's not well, we can, but we can't perform them properly. It's not possible because we don't have the opulences available. So those are some points about that Kali Yuga.
they'd have to discredit these the civic succession, basically.
Yeah. And there's so many speculators out there, and we don't speculate here. We try to take the pure knowledge from above and try to deliver that same pure knowledge to everyone we meet. Just like a male person does not get into the mail, it just simply delivers the mail. And the way you were describing spiritual life, yeah, it's obvious. It's so multi-layered and subtle and fragile and beautiful. And well, Bhagavad Gita as it is, Ki Jai. Hare